and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And we are in a state of uncertainty after the landmark Masterpiece Cake Shop case was heard before the Supreme Court this week.
It's a mess, and you may think there's only a win or lose possibility, but in fact, it's much more complicated than that. We will attempt to explain it. Meanwhile, the Republican tax bill is hurtling toward passage, loaded with heinous provisions to hurt average Americans, actually to hurt almost everybody. Yep. But the fight's not over.
Same-sex harassment scandals at the Metropolitan Opera and the Massachusetts legislature.
But the good news is that New York City's City Council has banned conversion therapy for almost everybody.
Unless you don't charge for it.
Yeah.
Austria's High Court has ordered marriage open to same-sex couples, but they've also ordered that domestic partnerships be open to different-sex couples.
Yeah, they had an interesting analysis. And we mourn the death and celebrate the life of Jim Nabors, who is dead at the age of 87. But all the news this week, or most of it, is about the Supreme Court case Masterpiece Cake Shop. Now let's review, starting with the couple who innocently entered the Masterpiece Cake Shop in...
We're talking about Dave Mullins and Charlie Craig,
yes.
Who, there they are, and that's them at the Supreme Court.
Now, they were getting married in Massachusetts because it wasn't legal yet in Colorado, but they wanted to have a party in Colorado, so they went to the cake shop to order a cake for their party, yes. Celebrating their Massachusetts marriage.
Right. And the baker, a guy named Jack Phillips of Masterpiece Cake Shop, said, you know, I'd sell you a cake off the shelf, but I don't make wedding cakes for gay weddings because I'm a religious person and I can't be a part of that.
And they said that's discrimination. And here in Colorado, there is a law against discriminating against people on the basis of sexual orientation.
There's Jack Phillips coming out with his wife after the Supreme Court arguments were held.
Yes.
And you know,
happy.
At first he cited his religious concerns, and he changed that sort of to, well, this is my First Amendment right. I don't have to create anything that goes against, I don't have to say anything with my art that I don't want to say.
Because there is a freedom of expression clause in the First Amendment that allows me to decide how I'm going to express myself. So the gay couple went to the Colorado Civil Rights Commission and lodged a complaint against this guy and said he is violating Colorado's law against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. And the Colorado Civil Rights Commission said, you're absolutely right, this is a violation. He's not, you know, all this stuff about religion and expression is nonsense. The important thing here is you walked in as a same-sex couple. He refused to accommodate you. He is a public business, a public accommodation. He must serve everybody equally and certainly not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. You win.
And again, the baker was not being asked he was being asked to make a cake. He was not being asked to write a message on the cake saying, I love same-sex marriage. He can continue to oppose same-sex marriage, as he does. As the lawyer one of the lawyers for our side, David Cole from the ACLU, said, when a baker writes happy birthday on a birthday cake, he's not wishing you a happy birthday. He's just writing happy birthday on a cake. You know, so look. There are some gray areas when it comes to expression.
We'll get to those.
But all right.
So first we win, the gay couple wins at the Civil Rights Commission. And then the baker and his Alliance Defending Freedom team.
A right-wing anti-gay group.
go to the courts in Colorado and protest this and appeal it. And the courts agree with the gay couple and say, nope, he is discriminating on the basis of sexual orientation. He refused service to you because you are a same-sex couple. That's illegal. You win.
And this is long settled law, because it came up with when the Civil Rights Act was passed, and there were people who said, for religious reasons, I don't want to serve black people, or I don't want to, serve black or interracial couples or whatever. And the Supreme Court of the United States said, no, you can't do that.
You cannot be a public accommodation, be a licensed business, and discriminate against people.
You can be a religious organization and maybe get away with that in some cases. Obviously, the Catholic Church is not bound by the civil rights laws to the point where they have to ordain women, although they should. But it's not covered under the civil law.
Exactly. So the ADF and the Baker were not giving up. They appealed this to the Supreme Court. They said, no, 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 we're not going to be forced to serve those dirty gay people. We're going to assert our right to make our own decisions on the grounds of our religious feelings and our right to freedom of expression.
And in the meantime, Jack Phillips, the baker, said, well, I just won't make wedding cakes then. And he's waiting for the opportunity to make wedding cakes just for heterosexual couples. He's not specifying what kind of couples, but he just wants to be able to invoke his religion at every turn, which is what the religious right wants on everything.
So this week,
not just for gays, everything.
The latest showdown, oral arguments at the Supreme Court between representatives of the gay couple on one side and the Baker on the other side.
Now, 4 of the justices, Alito, Thomas, Roberts, and Gorsuch, were appallingly, with the Baker on this. I mean, they were saying, really extraneous things. Alito was saying, well, you being forced to write something. No, he's not being forced to write something. It's how he's making roses on a cake, okay? That's what he does for everybody.
And the 4 liberal justices, Ginsburg, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Breyer, were clearly on the side of the same-sex couple and their right not to be discriminated against and to be treated equally with everyone else in the public realm.
So we might as well have just made it a colloquy and had the case heard by Anthony Kennedy. Apparently in his last term, après Kennedy, le déluge, by the way.
Well, you keep saying that. We'll see what happens.
Well, if we get a Democratic majority in the United States Senate in 2018, they can stop further appointments, but not maybe the next Supreme Court appointment.
Well, we don't know for sure that he's retiring. All of this is still up in the air. At any rate, he is the linchpin at the moment. So what did he do? He spoke out of all sides of his mouth. You can predict any kind of outcome based on what Anthony Kennedy said.
He seemed to have a couple of deep concerns, one of which was what he felt was anti-religious animus, hostility of one of the commissioners on the Civil Rights Commission.
Which was a complete misreading of what she said.
What she said was...
Yeah, go ahead.
Well,
You've got the quote.
No, I don't. All
right, well, what she said was that in considering this case, she said she was tired of religion being used to excuse discrimination and ill treatment of stigmatized people, and that she found this despicable.
And to support, she said, look, the Holocaust, slavery, were done in the name of religion. And she said, that's despicable. And it is despicable.
So Anthony Kennedy turns this around to claim that she is calling religion despicable. And really what she's saying is that religion is being misused in horrible ways by people who are manipulating these situations and inappropriately claiming a religious view to promote things like the Holocaust or slavery.
Maybe Kennedy is losing it.
Well, I hope that as they get into chambers and start discussing this, someone will point out to him the real meaning of what she said.
He's torn. He is a very conservative justice who has written all 4 major gay rights decisions in our favor, okay? But he has also signed on to the Hobby Lobby decision, which
I think is crucial in this case.
Right, which absolutely allowed a private business to invoke its religion and not give coverage for contraception.
As the liberal justices predicted at the time in the Hobby Lobby case, this is going to ruin the world because every business is going to come into this court and claim that their owners have a religious objection to child labor laws, black people, pension benefits, whatever, across the board. And it's going to wipe out civil rights laws, it's going to wipe out labor protections, it's going to wipe out everything if we give primacy to purported religious objections to all these things.
And don't forget, so far, the Supreme Court has not sort of granted a judicial LGBT rights law for the country yet,
right.
Which they could have. And look, most conservatives, and especially libertarians, are against civil rights laws. Their attitude is this, and Kennedy brought it up in arguments. He said, there are other shops you could have gone to. I mean, like, well, maybe there are, maybe there aren't, but
yes,
I mean, you shouldn't have to. Yeah. And many places, there's a sole service provider in an area,
Look,
etc.
You could be humiliated in one place, you could be humiliated in the second place or the third place, but surely down the road you can find one place that won't humiliate you.
And again, the libertarian view is if a business discriminates against black people or women, and you don't like that, you tell everybody about it, you boycott it, and you go somewhere else. They're a private business, they can do what they want.
And if they are doing things that the community doesn't want, they will be punished financially, and then that will give them the option of deciding to change their ways.
And some of that does happen. Look, in Mississippi, where they have a law where they don't have protections for gay rights to begin with, and they passed a law saying you may use your religious objection anytime, they went around to the businesses and said, you want to keep gays out? And they said vast majority, I think everybody was asked the question, said no, we don't want to keep them out, we want their money.
Yeah, but here's a business that does want to, or as Jack Phillips said, I serve gay people all the time. I'll be happy to sell you anything except a wedding cake.
But Kennedy asked the Solicitor General of the United States, representing our government now under the Trump administration.
Which has switched sides in this case.
His name is Francisco, his last name. Can the bakery put up a sign that says, no wedding cakes for gay couples? And he said it could say yes, and it could, as long as it said no custom cakes.
And then Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked at the White House press briefing shortly after these arguments, does the president agree, since his Solicitor General said this, that businesses should be allowed to post signs saying no custom wedding cakes for gay people? And Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, yes.
She did, rather directly about that.
Unbelievable.
Now, Kennedy actually, in response to that, said, well, that's an affront to the gay community. Oh, really? And
how about refusing to make them the cake in the first place? Is that an affront to the gay community?
And he said that businesses could start picking customers based on identity. Yes.
Yes.
All right, so
he is both offended by discrimination against us and offended by what he perceives as an expression of discrimination against religion.
So they may end up giving him the case to write, and he'll have to come up with his cockamamie, vision of whatever it is to try to split the, baby here.
Well, when they give him the case to write, he usually decides for us. Here are the possibilities. One, he could side with the conservatives and decide for the bakers' right to discriminate on the basis of purported religious principles, and we would lose.
With some tortured struggle to limit the scope of the decision, they keep saying.
Good luck with that.
Yes, because you're opening a Pandora's box here.
As you did with Hobby Lobby.
Right.
Or he could decide to, torture himself into overlooking what he thinks is the religious discrimination in the Civil Rights Commissioner's statement and decide with the liberals, in which case we would win. Or he could decide to try to cure the Civil Rights Commissioner's statement to make himself sleep better at night, even though he has misinterpreted her statement, and remand the case to the Civil Rights Commission or to the Colorado courts for a rehearing of this case in an attempt to clarify these issues.
So, you know, the other jurists, and I hope everybody was listening, I mean, at least on the court, you know, we're asking things like, what is speech and what's not? Baking a cake, fixing a meal. The lawyer for the other side, oh, not fixing the meal. I mean, now, I've been to a lot of restaurants where there's a lot of artistry on the plate, a lot more than is on the cake.
Well, you go to expensive restaurants.
No, I'm talking about weddings. You know, that's free.
Only when people take it.
So they got into it. The Alliance Defending Freedom, you know, lawyer, Kristen Wagoner.
Oh, she's an idiot.
She said that you know, a baker can refuse, but not a hairstylist at the wedding, or the makeup artist can't.
Yeah,
that's not art either.
Yeah,
I just want to let you know. I mean, does this become part of the record and the record of this case?
Meanwhile, of course,
then she said, but a racist baker could not bow out of doing it for an interracial marriage.
Well,
even
this
if,
again is where they try to make this distinction and say, well, you know, race is one thing, but sexual orientation, that's, you know, they don't buy sexual orientation as a definition. They don't think it's real. I am not trying to equate the two, but I am equating discrimination. And that's one way they try to wiggle out of this.
Well, and when Jack Phillips, the lawyer, says, you know, he's perfectly willing to sell them an off-the-shelf cake. And Kennedy said, that's not expression. Cake? And he made that cake too.
Yeah, exactly.
What the?
Yeah, that was a new wrinkle that I hadn't heard before. Meanwhile, of course, this is the court that just upheld Trump's discrimination against Muslims from certain countries by upholding the travel ban.
Yeah, where's the respect for religion? Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry, it's only Christian fundamentalism.
So we don't know where this is going to end up. It's a great mystery, and everybody is shaking their head.
And they don't have to, well, they don't ever have to issue the decision, but usually they don't. They save the big ones until June of 2018.
But one of the most despicable asterisks on this was a column in the New York Times on the op-ed page by their conservative columnist David Brooks.
A big supporter of same-sex marriage.
Who I've often described as a moron. No. I once asked the editor of that page, you know, I don't care if you hire conservatives. Right. I liked reading William Safire, but did you have to hire an idiot?
William Safire was pretty anti-gay.
He was at least intelligent.
He was.
David Brooks wrote a column this week on the morning of the oral arguments in the Masterpiece Cake Shop case saying, you know, why did they have to go to court? If they had just sat down with Jack Phillips, invited him to dinner, had a conversation with him, I'm sure that, you know, they could have worked this out.
Didn't you watch the tape of Dan Savage having Brian Brown of the National Organization for Marriage over to dinner? It didn't change anything.
There is a demonstration at the Supreme Court. For us, that Bible is on our side, and the sign that the Bible is holding says, "Use me not for your bigotry."
Right.
So that was nice. And then there were, of course, the counter demonstrators for the baker.
Free the cake baker!
They're all wearing aprons.
He's not in jail.
Free Masterpiece Cake Shop Squad.
Oh, my God.
Well, I'm sure it was quite a show on the steps of the Supreme Court. Thank heavens we weren't there.
It's nerve-wracking. And
We've been there in the past.
Right. Again, folks, you know, people slept out all night to get into the courtroom. But that's because it is so important, and it doesn't just have to do with LGBT rights. It has to do with all civil rights laws. And if you're allowed to, you know, take a pass because you have a a moral objection, a religious objection. And, this is what people have wanted to do all the time. With Trump as president especially, I have a right to call you this bad name, I have a right to discriminate, I have a right to do this. They're all feeling their oaths.
Well, and it's the Attorney General who wants a theocracy. It's Roy Moore who wants a theocracy. They want their interpretation of biblical law to trump civil law. They don't believe in civil law. They should be in court being tried as traitors and treasonous, they who have sworn to uphold the Constitution, because really what they want is so-called biblical law.
And what I would remind you is that the separation of church and state has been, pardon the expression, the salvation of the United States. It has let religion thrive, and in many forms, and it has kept us from killing each other most of the time.
Well, and all of that is going to be muddied if the Congress passes the tax bill with the repeal of the Johnson Amendment.
And we should, yes, and which would allow religions essentially to become political operatives. You get a tax exemption for giving them money, and then they spend it to run political campaigns.
Right.
Outrageous.
Right.
But before we leave the Supreme Court, we should also mention that they denied cert. They're not going to hear Houston's challenge to the Texas High Court ruling that cast doubt on whether the city was obligated to provide equal benefits to same-sex married couples. Now, Houston same-sex married couples are receiving equal benefits now. There is a case that's working its way through the courts. There was a bad ruling by the Texas High Court in June. It's basically what the Supreme Court of the United States is saying, we're not ready for this. It hasn't even really been adjudicated under Obergefell by the trial court. So, I heard from some of you out there very upset that we weren't taking this more seriously, because it's not it's a procedural motion essentially. It's not great. It'd be great if the Supreme Court stepped in and said stop this nonsense. But in terms of the way they handle cases, they're not ready for it, and they have ruled in our favor in a similar case in Arkansas already.
Right. Now, but we should also footnote before we leave this something you said before we started taping, both for the Masterpiece case, cake shop case, and this one. If they do remand the Masterpiece cake shop case back to a Colorado entity, and if we take longer to get to this Houston case, and who knows what other cases down the road, if Trump succeeds in putting another hard right conservative on the court to replace Kennedy or anybody else, we are really in trouble, because then we're just gone. They can do anything they want, just like the Republican Congress can do anything
we will have little access to the federal court, the ultimate federal courts. The federal courts at the lower level, even with Reagan and Bush judges, has been decent to us.
Absolutely.
But the high court is being
Trump's trying to change that too.
Yes, and he is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how he got it.
One by one, getting those right-wing conservative judges confirmed.
Right. So it's, but we've already heard from lawyers on our side saying, well, we'll do our best to stay within state law on a lot of things and just get state court rulings, because what else are we going to do? Well, what else do you do, folks, when that happens? Obviously, it requires political organization at every level to win back your legislatures, to win back the Congress, to do all those things. I mean, that is the way.
I was very happy to be visited by an old high school friend this week whose daughter is a young lawyer who worked for an AIDS organization in Mississippi for a while after going to law school here, and then went to Washington to work for a nonprofit there. And she is so inspired by what's going on in the world that she is moving back to her hometown of San Diego to prepare to run for office. And she's a great, progressive, smart human being.
That is happening all over the country.
Yep.
People who never thought of running for office are doing it. It's an old story. I mean, look, do we want to spend all our time on politics? No. We want to go, have a good time. Exactly, whatever. But, as has happened in places around the country when the school board gets taken over by crazy people, or crazy right-wingers, people who were on the sidelines say, oh, okay, I'll run for, who wants to serve on the school board? They run for school board. And that's what's been, and then now it's happening at every level of government.
And it needs to.
Yes.
Really needs to.
It does. That's the price of liberty. So especially since this...
Vigilance. Vigilance is
Right.
the price of liberty, as the saying goes. And the right wing has been more vigilant in the last, since the Reagan administration, and they have slowly but surely taken over.
70% of you or more are against this horrible quote-unquote tax bill, which is just the biggest overhaul of wealth in America upwards in the history of the United States. It's basically the Kill Americans law. I mean, it will lead to countless deaths. I mean, we're talking about massive billions of dollars in cuts to Medicaid and Medicare.
It's going to kill the country.
It's going to kill the country.
I call it the Great Bank Robbery. It is the Republican leaders deciding to take the money and run. They are just, it's a confiscatory bill.
Right.
They're taking all the money out of the government for themselves and their donors, and then they're going to tell the rest of us, well, we don't have any money, so we have to cut all your programs.
And they are especially targeting blue states, Democratic areas of the country, and make us pay more. We're already paying more than other places, but they want us to pay more for what's left of what's going on in the red states.
They're out to punish everyone who did not vote for Trump.
Well,
except that Trump voters are going to get punished too.
And watch out what's going to happen. All right, so I won't be able to afford to live in New York anymore. I'll move to one of your states and take over. Seriously, just like the Puerto Ricans who you treated so horribly, who are moving to Florida, who are going to turn that state blue.
Beware of unintended consequences. So people have been out in the streets protesting. Trump was in town last weekend, and there were demonstrations against him. We have just a little video.
That's early in the morning.
We need a lot more of that.
Yes.
Please. It's always a good day to do a demonstration.
Not a moment's peace.
Yeah.
And as we've reminded you, mark January 20th on your calendars, because we're all going to be back out on the street then, but there'll be many more in between.
Yeah.
And, you know, this bill, that's enough of that. This bill is not done because it's in conference now, but the House and the Senate have to reconcile a lot of differences on this. And if, we can peel off Susan Collins, who made a bad deal and apparently is not getting what she wanted to vote for this thing, and two more senators. John McCain, is this the way you want to go down in history? Oh, I guess so.
Well, Corker already voted against it, so if we can hold on to him and get two more, we can win it, but it's not looking good.
I mean, it's not just a tax bill. That's why I don't even want to call it that. But it classifies life as beginning at conception for certain purposes. It's a tax increase for 87 million families. Homeowners are screwed. But I read the list of the cuts that are going to be in various departments and what they're cutting. I mean, you can read this online. 300 people stormed the Cannon office building, by the way, saying, "Kill this bill, don't kill us." But it's cutting things like training for nurses, low-income energy assistance, flood hazard mapping. I mean, these are vast cuts. $4 billion cut from housing and urban development. So what are you just going to throw people out in the street?
Yes.
Cuts to
the churches will take care of it.
Cuts to minority businesses.
We'll all be living in churches.
And big cuts, of course, to the National Endowment for the Arts, the Endowment for the Humanities, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, environmental protection, $500 million cut. We might as well not give them any money. They don't do anything anymore. And USAID. This is international development that we've been doing. Now it's $4.5 billion basically, or $5 billion that spread around the world, which is America's effort to try to be a player in keeping the world a safer place, on the ground, and soft diplomacy. Oh, but hard diplomacy is being cut too. The State Department by $4 billion. I mean, folks. This is the end.
Watch out for the alliance of the Palestinians and the North Koreans. They're coming at us, both sides. All right. Well, and just lest you think there is something too petty for them to do, think again. For the annual reporters' Christmas party at the White House, why anyone is going to that is a mystery to me.
CNN won't go. Times won't go.
Yeah. They managed to deliberately exclude Chris Johnson, reporter for the Washington Blade, because they don't like gay people in the White House.
There he is on the left.
And on the right is April Ryan of American Urban Radio Networks, who they mistakenly excluded.
Oh, was it a mistake?
That's what they said.
She gets called on at press conferences. Chris never gets called on. He was called on during the Obama administration. They don't want any gay questions, or if they can avoid them, at the press conferences. And
the LGBT envoy in the State Department, Randy Barry, has been reassigned. They say he's done his 2-year stint in that job. They have someone temporarily replacing him, but it's probably someone anti-gay. That's just a loose comment by me.
We'll keep you posted
I don't know.
on that.
Yeah, we'll find out.
All right.
Shall we move on to
abuse? Big week for abuse, including same-sex abuse, folks. Well, Time People of the Year were abused women who have come forward.
Excellent choice.
All right. So,
inevitable choice.
So, and I'm glad it was done with all women, because women have prompted all this, but we do have some same-sex male cases to talk about. In the Metropolitan Opera, the long record of abuse of James Levine, the conductor, there he is, has come. I actually got something from somebody. Why didn't you and the gay press go after him? And I said, look, the Times went after him over the years, and he kept denying, and the Metropolitan Opera kept denying anything was going on.
Yeah.
But they were making payoffs. So I think there is an investigation to be done here, and
Yeah, and
some of the people who came forward are in their 60s.
Yes.
This happened to them when they were kids, and he was young.
Yeah, exactly. And the other case that came to light this week was in Massachusetts. The president of the state Senate in Massachusetts is a gay man, Stan Rosenberg, and he has a husband, Brian Hefner, who is a lobbyist.
That's Brian there on the right.
Yeah, Stan on the left.
And they were supposed to keep everything separate, not get involved in Senate business, but Brian over there was going up to men, and not necessarily gay men, just going up to men who had business before the state and grabbing them in all kinds of ways and saying, hey, play ball with me and I'll get you what you want. And if you don't, you're not going to get it. That's the story. He denies it. Stan says, I didn't know about it, but Stan has stepped down as the president of the Senate.
And it's the same, we go right back to Harvey Weinstein. It's all about the power dynamics with James Levine. Same thing. These were potential proteges that he was sexually abusing. Teenagers who wanted him to be their mentor, wanted to get jobs with him, and he abused that power by sexually abusing them.
And there are a lot of stories being written, but he was such a great conductor, all right.
Absolutely.
All right, but and we're going to lose such talent. What about the talent that he denied to the world by abusing these people who left the business because they didn't want to be around people like him or this?
Not to mention what happened to their mental health after these encounters. It's people report, decades of disturbance because of these.
How about that Al Franken? Is he gone now? I mean,
by the time you see this, he may be.
Well, there were 14 senators who called for him to leave. I think people are. There was supposed to be an investigation there.
Yeah.
But as with
Roy Moore?
Well, no, as with
Conyers?
Conyers
take your pick.
Yeah, well, Conyers stepped down this week.
Yes, and some of this is the Democrats wanting to take the moral high ground so that they can go after a Roy Moore or a Donald Trump or others. Because the Democrats have not had the best record.
Nope.
I mean, Teddy Kennedy, for heaven's sake, and any number of others. Jack Kennedy.
Well, again, I mean, we do have to distinguish between sexual harassment and sex, and just flirting and coming, inviting someone out.
How about negligent homicide?
Sexual misbehavior. you know, that there are gradations here.
Absolutely, and important distinctions, and all that needs to be taken into account. I don't think this is a witch hunt at this point. I think people are making distinctions, and I think they're uncovering real abuse.
Yes, and it is still, now, of course, some bad people may get an idea. Oh, okay, I'm just going to start accusing someone I don't
yes,
like. You, of course, when you do that, you're taking on a lot of things, you know, yourself, and you know, you're subjecting yourself to false accusations and things like that. But you know.
All right. Well, let's move from there to violence.
Well, in Texas, in how do you want to say this town?
Tascasita?
Yeah.
That's a guess.
Yes, in Texas, a guy named Devin Wade, we have a picture of him, there he is, 28 years old, was killed in a domestic dispute by his boyfriend, Mario Williams, 29. Now, you know, Williams is saying, we had a fight, and he was, you know, being violent to me, and I had a gun, and yes, I shot him. So we don't know. He's been charged with murder, though.
Yeah.
So it's a horrifying situation. Mr. Wade seems to have been highly regarded in his community, but it doesn't matter whether he was or he wasn't. It's tragic.
And in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, we have yet another murder of a trans woman of color, Brooklyn Brianna Stevenson, 31 years old, murdered. Details unclear.
What are they saying this is, the 37th?
No, I think it's like the 27th this year. And
that we know about.
Yes, it's important to say that we know about because we believe these are vast undercounts. But
and they don't know if these are quote unquote hate crimes, but I mean, you know, look, most of it is attributable to a lot of these women working, you know, in part of society, often with sex work and with other things where there is a lot of violence, and they get caught up in it. They shouldn't have to. You know, the biggest thing that transgender people need are jobs.
Exactly.
And education and respect.
Let's see, losing a job in Jacksonville, North Carolina, the children's choir director of a United Methodist church. The pastor fired the choir director because he's gay, and the pastor said, we are not supposed to have any gays in leadership. Well, in fact, the rules of the United Methodist Church are heinous enough, but they just say no gays as clergy. There is no rule in the church about choir directors. Nonetheless, this guy has been fired.
You know, even though gay teachers, for instance, in New York have been protected long before we even had a gay rights bill, there were policies against discrimination. Very few teachers came out because of the difficulties of dealing with young people, of what people would say about you dealing with young people. Look, we worked at the Hedrick Martin Institute. Took a long time for this community to support its own youth.
Also in North Carolina, in Rowan County, the holiday caravan parade threw out of the parade a pharmacy float because the pharmacy had invited PFLAG to be part of the float. Oh no, we can't have that. No parents, friends, and family of lesbians and gays, or LGBT, I'm sure they're now renamed. So no pharmacy float in the holiday caravan parade.
So Lexington, Kentucky has some rainbow crosswalks, okay? They also have an openly gay mayor, Jim Gray, is an out gay guy. He ran for governor, didn't he?
Yeah.
Anyway, a federal official is complaining to them that this is unsafe. This is from the a federal highway administration official said this is not standard and and the mayor
distracting.
Mayor said we'll keep an eye on it. We'll let you know.
We have a problem. All right, let's, as we begin to, well, whatever. I want to do a lighter political story from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
A state representative, Darrell Metcalf, a Republican with a long history of racism and homophobia, was at a little meeting and he objected to the actions of his Democratic colleague, Matt Bradford. Let's go to the videotape.
There is a better way to do this, guys. We don't have to proceed on this one. I hear you. I understand. There's some hard feelings with PennDOT.
Representative Bradford,
Yeah.
just look, I'm a heterosexual. I have a wife. I love my wife. I don't like men, as you might, but don't stop touching me all the time. So like, keep your hands to yourself. Like, if you want to touch somebody, you have people on your side of the aisle that might like it. I don't.
Okay, Chairman. Chair. Okay, we're officially off the rails. So let me throw out a simple idea. My intent was just to beg for your permission for about 30 seconds.
Then beg, don't touch.
I don't know where we go from here, really. Let me make a suggestion that we do a...
He reminds me of Carl Palladino in New York, a right-wing bigot who ran for governor.
Just a little, comic relief for your evening after the tragedies we've told you about for the first 45 minutes.
Now, Joy Reid thought she was being funny in 2007 when she worked in Miami and talk radio and for the Miami Herald, and she took to calling Charlie Crist Miss Charlie and playing on the fact that he was closeted. And so all this has been brought to light by Fox. So she apologized, and Charlie accepted, and he's still homosexual.
Yeah, I don't know why she had to apologize to him.
Well, I mean, we certainly talked about it. Saying Miss Charlie, I don't like the misogyny level of that or that kind of stuff.
Whatever.
But so she apologized. He accepted.
Okay.
Water under the bridge. Get over it.
Congratulations to the New York City Council, which passed a law forbidding conversion therapy for not only minors, as some jurisdictions have done, but adults too, unless
you don't pay for it. If
you're a religious organization offering it for free, then you can offer conversion therapy. The only people to vote against it were a couple of Orthodox Jews on the city council who historically have wanted to offer conversion therapy. But there's also something I heard about. I'll give you more details next week. There's a conference coming up of an Orthodox organization that helps LGBTQ teens.
Yes, they had a concert of some kind.
They're having something on December 15th. I'll tell you about it next week when I have the details. Also in New York City, the Ali Forney Center dedicated its B. Arthur residence for 18 homeless LGBTQ youth.
She left them like $300,000 when she died.
Yep.
B. Arthur.
The mayor was there, and she was a dedicated supporter.
Friend of the community. She was.
That's all we know. In Texas, the longtime out lesbian sheriff of Dallas, Lupe Valdez, is considering running for governor against Greg Abbott. Fat chance is what most people say,
well,
but
Texas is a-changing.
Yes, it is.
People from Puerto Rico are moving there.
And we mourn the death of Marty Enright, who was the co-founder with his husband George Brophy of the Buddy's restaurant in Chicago, which was in the Chicago Hall of Fame because it was such an important part of the community, very philanthropic to all the social service organizations there. He was 85, living in Florida now, and died of pancreatic cancer.
And you all saw that Jim Nabors died this week. Gomer Pyle, and the guy who sang back home in Indiana at the Indianapolis 500 forever, dead at 87. We had always known that he was gay too, but he came out when he got married to his husband, Stan Cadwallader. They were together for 38 years. So that's when he decided to tell everybody publicly is when they got married, because you kind of have to, because it's a public document when you get married.
And then he said, oh, everybody always knew I was never really closeted. Do you know how many years he denied it? The rumor was always him and Rock Hudson.
Yes, indeed.
Maybe. But he had a liver transplant in '94.
And Marlon Brando and Wally Cox.
Oh, yes.
Remember that one?
Yep.
Yeah.
We could go on.
We could go on. And, don't be surprised. Just read Scotty Bowman's book.
Yeah, I tried to. I ordered it off Amazon, and they just told me I was getting a refund because they're not sending me the book.
Scotty Bowman was the pimp for all of Hollywood. gay, lesbian, etc.
It's a great story.
And there's a movie coming out about it, or it's out about it. It's been at the film festival.
Portland, Maine School Board has adopted pro-trans guidelines, protections, and training for the staff.
Yep.
And if you don't know whether you're registered to vote or you want to register to vote or whatever, there's a website called iwillvote.com that you can put in your name and address, and they'll tell you whether you are registered to vote, where you're registered to vote, how to register to vote, all of that. iwillvote.com.
Okay.
International news. Now we really do have to move along.
Well, the big news is that Austria's constitutional court ruled that gay couples can marry and domestic partnerships must be open to different sex couples. This is supposed to go into effect, I'm a little confused by the stories, January 1st, 2019?
Yes.
By then. They can do it earlier through legislation.
Yes. And they had a very interesting analysis. What they said was, we have registered partnerships for same-sex couples, but the problem with that is that if you fill out some form that says you're in a registered partnership, you are automatically outing yourself because that's only for same-sex couples.
Oh.
So if we open marriage to same-sex couples and registered partnerships to opposite-sex couples, then everybody's in the mix and you can be anything and you don't necessarily have to out yourself if you don't want to, just by announcing you're married or in a registered partnership.
Okay. The United Nations has a new expert on sexual orientation, gender identity issues, Victor Madrigal Borlas of Costa Rica, who lives in Copenhagen. He's an international human rights lawyer, has represented victims of torture.
Yes, an expert on torture, which is very interesting because what this job is supposed to be, the guy who first had it resign for family health reasons or something.
And speaking of torture, that's what's happening in Chechnya to gay people.
Oh, wait a second. I haven't finished my sentence.
About UN. I'm sorry. I thought we had to rush through this. Go ahead.
I was in the middle of a sentence.
Sorry.
It's important that he's an expert on torture because the job involves advising on violence and discrimination against LGBT people around the world. So torture is a very important concept to bring into this.
Yes. And
that's all.
And that's why I was bringing up Chechnya. And the new Russian ambassador, Anatoly Antonov, was in San Francisco speaking at the consulate there. And Michael Petrelis took it upon himself alone to get out there and and protest and say, stop killing Chechen gays. And you know, this whole big audience, of 250, 300 people, they just sit there like staring into space instead of saying, yeah, stop this. Why don't you stop this?
In Australia, they are continuing to move ahead on full legalization of same-sex marriage. However, the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, now says he wants a few more amendments in the bill to reinforce religious exemptions. He doesn't really want it. It's nothing new. It's what we already know. It's what's already in the law. He just wants to make it clear that there are certain limited exemptions.
Well, did the Senate bill include this thing that if you're an officiant at marriages, you don't have to do it if you object?
Yes.
Oh, that's bad.
Yes, but it's considered a limited problem. Also,
it's a slippery slope. That's what I say.
Also in Australia, they have finally reclassified the death of a Sydney gay man in 1988. They're going to reinvestigate it. This is the thing of the guys who were thrown off the cliffs, and they were all classified as suicides originally, and then they found that there were gangs of young men who were tossing gay men off the cliff. It
was a cruising area at the top of the cliff, so anti-gay people would go there, grab the men, and just throw them off the cliff, and then they were classified as suicides. It's horrendous. It was a big documentary about it.
And now the cops are getting more into reinvestigating that.
In Tanzania, a woman was arrested for being in a video where she just kissed her girlfriend
at a party. And in Uzbekistan, a gay male couple have been arrested and examined anally for their sex habits. Homosexuality is illegal in Uzbekistan, and they are headed for jail.
And our new UN expert from Costa Rica should go back there because thousands are marching against same-sex marriage and abortion.
And Costa Rica is a pretty liberal place. In Turkey, a constitutional court has overturned the law that required trans people to prove they can't procreate by having had sterilization procedures.
In Hungary, a rights commissioner there has ruled that the government's refusal to grant same-sex couples an adoption is unlawful. Hungary!
And a couple of 16-year-old boys in London were arrested after gay bashing a 19-year-old man on the subway. He was with a group of friends. The friends ended up attacking the 16-year-olds, and the 16-year-olds ended up getting arrested.
And a Bulgarian woman who's in a same-sex marriage that she had in the United Kingdom is suing, and she's got her hearing this week on whether Bulgaria will recognize that.
AIDS news. Well, it was World AIDS Day last week, and the White House, much to our amazement, actually issued a World AIDS Day proclamation.
And had a red ribbon on the White House.
Yes, the same old big red ribbon on the White House. Amazing.
But they didn't mention gay people in the proclamation.
Well, at least they didn't rail against gay people in the proclamation. That's my bar now. If they don't actively criticize gay people in the proclamation, I'm happy that at least they issued a blanket proclamation condemning HIV and AIDS.
And you were the World AIDS Day speaker at the LGBT at the synagogue.
Yes.
I was there. It was a terrific speech. Would you share a little bit of what your message was to people on World AIDS Day?
Well, I was reminding people that the epidemic comes in a long line of things like the civil rights movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, feminism, that it's all about people in power not caring about people who don't have power and being willing to let people die by attrition. And trying to take that forward into what we are facing today, and to equate that to what's happening with the tax bill, what's happening with the Trump administration in general. Again, people, a small number of people in power who are really out to get everybody else. And I'm not someone who believes that the HIV virus was created to kill people, but I do believe vociferously that the government and people in power did their damnedest to ignore it and not do anything about it and not save people they didn't care about. And I just see the same thread going through recorded history, and it is up to us in the grassroots to rise up and take power to change this. And that's the only thing that ever has. It's what that's the grassroots movements we've seen in the civil rights movement, in feminism, against the war and against HIV discrimination.
And it can be very overwhelming listening to all this here or what you were saying, but you also encouraged us to balance our lives.
Yes. Watch bad TV, play golf, do whatever.
You got to.
You got to be in it for the long haul, so you got to pace yourself. And I must say, I was very gratified by the audience's response. And I wasn't the only speaker. There were members of the congregation, particularly those on their Red Ribbon Committee, who work on these issues on an ongoing basis, who got up and talked about the work they've done and
all over the world,
their experiences. And that was very, very moving and terrific. So thank you to CBST for inviting me, and congratulations to the congregation.
And speaking of all over the world, for their first public outing, Prince Harry and his fiancée, Meghan Markle, their first visit was on World AIDS Day to the Terrence Higgins Trust, the big AIDS organization there. That's good, raising consciousness that way.
And this week we attended one of the annual events of Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS,
the Gypsy
whom we
of the
adore.
Year, the Gypsy of the Year competition. And this is Broadway people, off-Broadway people, and touring companies raising money. My God, they raised a tremendous amount of money. There is a picture of just the cast of Dear Evan Hansen on Broadway, who raised $5.6 million in a couple of weeks.
6 weeks.
Yeah, in a couple of weeks, to do things.
To contribute to Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS,
one of our
which
supporters.
supports not only people living with HIV and AIDS, but women's health issues, breast cancer, et cetera, and people in need all over the country. And they're just a fantastic organization. They do support us because of the AIDS reporting and work that we do. But they are they've been in it for almost 30 years. They do great work.
And Javier Munoz, right, is playing Hamilton in Hamilton now, and he did the moment of silence this year. Made me cry, as it always does. Judith Light used to do it all the time, but he did it and referenced the fact that this organization saved his life. He is HIV positive himself. And
the show was hilarious and beautiful. And
Seth Rudetsky for the 10th year.
Fantastic.
He's really unbelievable.
Yeah, he is so good.
And great skits that were done by people, great entertainment. So the Gypsy of the Year competition comes around once a year. Check it out.
And I have to add a footnote to something we reported last week. We talked, because we just heard the news, that new infections with HIV are down in New York City, particularly among men having sex with men. But what hasn't been widely reported is that infections are up among women in New York City. And you know, half the people in the world living with HIV are women. And that is just not paid enough attention to.
Absolutely.
All right. And the theme of the synagogue's observance this year was women in HIV, women working in HIV, women with HIV, the whole business.
All right.
All right, entertainment news.
Well, I saw Once on This Island, a revival of it on Broadway. This is a musical about a fable in the Caribbean. The best part of it, I thought, was when they had the hurricane and this wind blew through the whole place. But the plot kind of lost me. It's about, this is a spoiler alert, it's about a pretty orphan, there she is, who grows a peasant, who falls in love with a rich man, a light-skinned man, who she saves. But to save him, she has to sort of give up her life, and he doesn't even want her because he can't marry her because of class. And you know, I won't tell you the ending, but it's like, it was very hard to root for that kind of a plot. Leah Salonga is in it, and she's kind of wasted as a goddess. But I'll tell you, got a great review in the New York Times. You might want to go by them rather than me. It's certainly a lively show.
I saw a documentary that's playing now in Philadelphia and opening this week in New York and next week in LA called Quest. The documentary team followed a family in North Philadelphia for 10 years. There is an LGBT plot twist to this that I won't give away, but it's a pretty moving documentary about this family in North Philly. Quest is the name of it.
You remember Snagglepuss?
Sure.
The pink mountain lion who used to pal around with Huckleberry Hound. Well,
Yep.
he is now officially gay. And
he always had a lisp.
And he is, as we all knew.
Oh, God.
And he is, in this new comic book series, he is playing a playwright in 1953, a la Tennessee Williams.
Oh my God, Snagglepuss is Tennessee Williams?
Pretty much.
Your favorite short animated gay cartoon is on the short list for short animated film Oscar, In a Heartbeat.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Well, they're down to 10, but they'll wind up with 5.
I saw a revival of Terrence McNally's Where Is Tommy Flowers Gone from 1971, and it has not held up, despite a game cast.
Princess Sid, CYD, is getting a lot of Oscar buzz. You can now see it on video on demand or DVD, and it's still playing in L.A. Lesbian teenagers.
Call Me By Your Name won the LA Critics Award for Best Picture, and Armie Hammer, who's in that, is starring with Tom Skerritt in Straight White Men.
Can't wait for that.
But it's the first play by an Asian woman in the history of Broadway.
Okay. Well, on that note, we're done, and we will see you next week.
Thanks.